Hi, everybody out there. My name is Jessica Andrianis, and I'm here with Sherry Wall. We're going to be talking to you today about the powerful impacts of self-love and mental health. Just to give you a little background about myself, I work at Hutchings Psychiatric Center, and I have worked there for almost 7 years. I worked with kids in an outpatient program, and now I'm working with adults in inpatient psych.
Everybody, I'm Sherry Wall. I am the head recreation therapist at the New York State Veterans Home at Montrose. Previously, I worked with youth in psych at Rockland Children's Psychiatric Center, as well as forensic psych at Mid-Hudson Forensic Psychiatric Center. I've worked in skilled nursing, drug and alcohol rehab, etc. So hopefully our experience will be able to help you in order to understand the powerful impact of self-love in mental health and how you as recreation therapists can assist your patients with finding their own impacts, if you will.
So just to briefly review some of the learning outcomes we're going to go over today in this presentation, we're going to be identifying at least 5 benefits to incorporating self-love practices in therapeutic programming with your patients. We're going to, you're going to be able to identify at least 2 different self-love practices that you can complete in a group program, identify 4 obstacles to practicing self-love, and identify at least 2 different exercises to teach patients that you'll be able to incorporate into your day as well as their everyday. Okay. So to start, we're going to show a video. Oh, let me pull that down. Okay, we're going to show you this YouTube video really quick. It's a 5-minute video. It kind of really captures some signs that you might see in some of the patients that you're working with, how you could tell if they are lacking some self-love in their life.
Hey, Psych2Goers, we're so glad to see you here. And we want to thank you for supporting us. Your ongoing help, sharing, and liking has helped Psych2Go continue our mission to make psychology accessible to everyone. Now, let's begin, shall we? Self-love is an important aspect to your well-being. It affects how you view yourself, the decisions you make, and your relationships with others. However, you may have grown up in an undesirable situation, and these circumstances can make loving yourself extremely difficult. As a disclaimer, we wanted to say that self-love is a serious and sensitive subject. This video is for informative purposes only, and is in no way intended to serve as professional mental health advice. If you feel that you're struggling, it's best to seek help from a qualified mental health professional or doctor. With all of that said, let's look at the 10 signs you might be lacking in self-love. Number 1, you hide your true self from others. Do you feel like a metaphorical chameleon? Do you change when you're around others and hide certain parts of your personality? This process is known as masking. You might worry about being judged for who you are and act differently to make up for it. Or perhaps you don't like a certain aspect about yourself and you try to change your behavior to satisfy yourself. 2, you overanalyze your own behavior. Lacking in self-love leads you to overanalyze your own behavior. You can then use this information about your behavior to develop a mask. You study the behavior of people around you so you can properly mimic them. This becomes problematic when you're hyper-analyzing your behaviors and are then changing yourself in order to become someone else. 3, you have a strong fear of being judged by others. Are you worried about what others think of you? Do you think others are closely observing what you're doing, how you're acting, or what you're wearing to the point that it makes it hard to go out in public? You might find yourself needing to make serious changes before considering yourself acceptable to go out. These feelings are usually highly irrational and may be impacting your relationships with others. 4, you struggle with physical and mental self-care. Do you find that you aren't treating your body and mind as well as you should? You might be skipping meals or overeating. In some cases, you may have turned to alcohol and other substances to cope with your feelings. You might not be taking enough time out for yourself and are neglecting to build your own happiness. If you relate to this, How do you plan to improve your self-care? Number 5, you feel inferior to others. You might feel that you're somehow inferior to others. You could be insecure about your personality, intelligence, or your appearance. These insecurities, combined with a hyper-awareness of others in comparison, leads you to harshly judge yourself and try to mask who you are. 6, you're too hard on yourself. You find yourself diminishing your accomplishments and focusing on your failures. Do you think that you're not doing enough? It's like being in a constant uphill battle to achieve more without taking a moment to appreciate what you've done. You compare yourself to others and hyperfixate on your shortcomings, never feeling satisfied with what you have. Number 7, you lack confidence. You struggle to feel like your opinion and your voice matter. Lacking confidence in yourself can lead you to discredit your ideas and keep quiet instead of speaking up. Similar to feeling inferior, you feel that it's best to not offer any input out of fear of being rejected or judged. 8, you need excessive affirmation and attention. Do you find that you need excessive affirmation that you're doing okay? You might have a hard time accepting who you are and need the attention and affection from others in order to feel validated. This puts a tremendous strain on relationships and can be emotionally taxing for you and the people around you. 9, you have difficult and unstable relationships. Relationships are difficult enough to traverse, but if you're lacking in self-love, you might have some unique problems. You might feel that you shut others out of your life because of fear of rejection. Or you might feel that you are the inferior partner in a relationship and need constant validation. You think your partner is too good for you, and this creates an unhealthy dynamic. And 10, you settle for less. You settle for less than what you can achieve. Did you give up on a dream and settle for something completely different? Part of this may be due to your fear of failure, or you may not feel that you have what it takes and sell yourself short on achieving what you truly want. You may find yourself choosing to settle for a less satisfactory life. Self-love is truly important. Life is difficult and has many ups and downs. It's important to know that things can improve. If you are struggling, it's always good to try and reach out and talk with someone you trust. Sometimes, all it takes is getting in contact with the right mental health professional and taking steps to create a better life. If you enjoyed watching this video, give us a thumbs up.
Okay, let me get back over to the presentation. So one of the main reasons I wanted to show that video Sherry and I did, we wanted you to kind of think about how many signs that you might see that the video showed in some of the patients you work with, and kind of think about how sometimes when we ask our patients if they are lacking in self-love, it might not always be easy for them to describe yes or no, but if you show them a video such as this, it kind of gives a lot more information around it. It educates them on the aspects that encompasses self-love. So it's a very good resource for educational purposes too for the patients.
Even if you can't stream a video, you could either print, like type out what they say and you could read it to them, or you could find something similar. We definitely think that, you know, the more media-based stuff that you can do, the better, because you're probably going to have a more engaged group dynamic. But if you're not able to, I know certain places are not able to stream, they're not able to utilize, you know, the internet the way that others are. So work around what you have and what you're able to do.
Yep. Thanks, Sherry. So we're going to start talking about what self-love is. So the internet will give you a variety of definitions of what self-love is, whether it's appreciating yourself and growing, making changes that help you grow physically, psychologically, emotionally, spiritually, having a high regard for your own happiness, well-being, taking care of your own personal needs, never giving up, having a positive outlook. It has a million definitions out there. Everyone will have their own idea of what self-love looks like, and that's okay because it should look differently for everybody. It is important to remember that when you are creating programming for self-love with a variety of different patients, because like I said, self-love will look different for so many different people. So you want to make sure you have a lot of different variety in the topics of your sessions or groups that you put together. So that could include you poll your patients on asking them what types of topics they would like to talk about, or you, like I said, you do a lot of variety of different topics. You want to make sure you encompass a lot of different things, because self-love can mean a lot of different things for people.
And I think it goes back, just to jump in, it goes back to knowing your patients and knowing who you're working with, right? You know, even if they're new to the group, you're still gonna have done some kind of, you know, either you've read their chart or you've done an assessment with them if they're your own patient that you're documenting on. But it goes back to knowing your people and knowing what their strengths and their needs are, so that you can target your, you know, and tailor your programming to that as well.
Yep. So next we're going to talk about some examples of what self-love means. It could, like I said, mean in the last slide, talking to yourself in a positive way, putting yourself first, taking a break when you need it, trusting your gut, staying true to who you are, being nice to yourself, setting boundaries with others. It can mean a wide variety of things. It could mean saying affirmations to yourself a certain amount of times. It could mean meditating a certain amount of times a day. It could mean not saying any negative comments to myself. So again, it's knowing your clients on what exactly they would like to get out of self-love programming and how to give that programming to them to meet their needs. So with identifying what self-love means, it's also important to look at what it is not. So as the chart shows you very clearly, self-love is a lifelong process. It is not a destination. It is important for everybody to practice these principles. It is not about self-confidence only. Self-love is part of mental health. It is not arrogance. Self-love is maintained with action and effort. It is not dependent on what others think of you. So this is important to think about when doing these programs with patients, so they really know what the true definition of self-love is.
And it's also important to recognize that, you know, a lot of what you're going to be doing will overlap with, you know, I guess, self-esteem and, you know, things like that. So really and truly honing in on self-love versus other modalities and other, you know, balances as well. I think it's really important. And to recognize that, like Jess said, everybody's going to have a different idea of what self-love is. And we have to be, you know, as a therapist, we really have to do it just in the moment, recognizing, hey, this isn't self-love. I know you might think it is, but let's talk about why it's not.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So let's talk a little bit about self-efficacy. And really, I mean, I think we know, I'm sure we've all studied it before. Self-efficacy is really a person's belief of their ability to succeed in a particular situation. And take a look at all the things that go into self-efficacy, right? In addition to that belief, it becomes also our performance outcomes, right? So it's whether or not we perceive that we've done well in a performance, okay? And it says here, if you see one has performed well at a task previously, they will be more likely to feel competent and to perform it well at a similarly associated task, excuse me. In addition to that, you also have, you know, verbal persuasion, and it's influenced by the encouragement and discouragement pertaining to somebody's performance or their ability to perform. And again, it might be that it's other people's opinions, but is it really, right? We have to tell them, and we have to make sure that they understand that it's not about other people's beliefs about ourselves. It's about our own beliefs about ourselves, okay? In addition to that, we have the vicarious experiences, because as we know, that's a huge tenet of recreation therapy, right? People can develop higher low self-efficacy vicariously through others' performances. They can watch somebody else perform and then compare their own competence. So it's a double-edged sword, right? I'm watching somebody succeed and I'm like, oh, I can't do that. Or I'm watching someone succeed and I go, wow, I can do that too, right? Then there's physiological feedback. Take a look at that for a second. They experience sensations when they perceive emotional arousal influences. So that's, you know, when our heart rate goes faster, when we're, you know, experiencing fight or flight, etc. That goes into it because, you know, we're recognizing that there's nerves that are going on. So maybe our self-esteem goes down, maybe our self-efficacy goes down as well. So all of this goes into that self-efficacy. literacy aspect of it. And then we have self-worth. Look at the quote. It says, "It's not your job to love me, it's mine." And I thought that's really important. And I think Jess, I know Jess agrees as well. You know, it's self-worth is about valuing ourselves, and having a sense of self-worth, of self-value, means that we are worthy to ourselves, not to anybody else, right? And take a look here. It says, you know, the psychologists for the University of Michigan's Institute for Social Research, they found that college students who base their self-worth on external sources, including physical appearance, the approval of that they do or do not receive from others, even their academic performance. Those who perceived that worth based on others reported a higher level of stress, anger, and problems with performance, including, you know, interpersonal relationships, drug and alcohol use, as well as possible symptoms of eating disorders. So this is really important to recognize that my self-worth is about me loving me, not about my perception of whether or not you love me. And we have to teach our patients that as well, because a lot of times we put a lot of our self-worth into what others value us, and we have to remind them that it doesn't matter what anybody thinks except for ourselves.
Yeah. And you'll sometimes see some patients you work with always needing that validation constantly. And this kind of goes back to this. Sometimes they're lacking that self-worth, so they almost require that gratification on a daily basis from the group facilitators doing programming or their treatment team that they're doing well, because they're really missing the self-worth they have for themselves.
Right. And again, it all comes back to that, you know, trauma-informed care that we always talk about, recognizing that, you know, it might have stemmed from childhood, that now as adults, they still need to learn about self-worth, even though they think that they understand it and they think they understand self-esteem. It's quite clear that they don't if they're looking towards group leaders, if they're looking towards peers or significant others for that value, when it's really lying within them. So in addition to self-worth, we have self-esteem, right? And that includes feelings of competence, a sense of belonging, how we see ourselves and our identity, right? It's a feeling of security. And the definition from Very Well Mind says, you know, it's used to describe a person's overall subjective sense of personal worth or value. And it's defined as how much you appreciate and like yourself regardless of the circumstance. And it's not easy for people to identify that. Many people feel very uncomfortable finding, you know, ways to boost their self-esteem and to be able to verbalize that they have a high sense of esteem, right? They might think that it's boasting or it's something, you know, that they shouldn't be talking about, because then it looks like it's arrogance, right? As we saw in a couple slides before, it's not that. Everybody has self-esteem, but how high is it is the question.
So now we're going to talk a little bit about the impacts that self-esteem might have on treatment and might have on a lot of different things that motivate you through your life, really. So there's a couple of studies I wanted to touch on. The one on the screen, they did a study on over 2,000 adolescents on an inpatient unit, and they found that those that had higher self-esteem suffer fewer symptoms of anxiety and depression and attention problems over time. So they found from the study that self-esteem acts as a resilience factor against many of these symptoms. This research further demonstrated the importance of self-esteem in clinical treatment, and then incorporating self-esteem practices in clinical treatment could in fact lower the length of stay of patients. Another study on over 1,000 individuals in an open psychiatric outpatient clinic found that there was a vicious cycle between low self-esteem and onset of psychiatric disorders. Thus, low self-esteem increased the susceptibility for development of psychiatric disorders. That's crazy. It's like, wow, we have the fix to all these people needing treatment. All we need to do is increase their self-esteem, right? You think, wow, that's all we got to do, but it's not that easy.
Right. It's not at all that easy.
And I tell you, most of the patients, when they come into a psych unit, they will tell you they are lacking self-love. They are so down on themselves. They can't believe they're here. They can't believe they got readmitted. They are really feeling depressed about their situation. And it's up to us to figure out how we can support them in these like low parts of their life. So further, self-esteem and mental health, obviously there is a connection there. Research has linked low self-esteem to mental health issues, like the previous slide said, and poor quality of life. So a couple other examples that low self-esteem can affect are your relationships, your vulnerability to addiction, depression, and anxiety. A lot of people, the poor relationships goes with having negative relationships equals negative feelings and negative perceptions of yourself, which would bring your self-esteem down.
And then
Studies show.
Sorry, I'm so sorry. I was going to
It's
say
okay.
a lot of times it becomes a vicious cycle, right? So we constantly are seeking approval and we're seeking, esteem from others. So we enter in these poor relationships, and when they don't work out, maybe we turn to drugs or alcohol to help us cope, and then we become depressed or anxious because, hey, look at this, now I haven't even been able to handle this. So then they go into another relationship with somebody else because their validation and their self-worth is wrapped up in what others think of them as opposed to what they think of themselves.
Right. Studies show that low self-esteem in childhood and early adulthood can be a predisposition to addiction later in life. And some people use substances to help get rid of their negative emotions that they're feeling. But over time, their self-esteem is not going to get any better, even if they get rid of that addiction that they once had.
Right. And they have to fill it with something else. So you have to be the therapist to help them fill it with positive self-love, how to help them help themselves, I should say.
Or realize that they need to help themselves, because a lot of times it's hard for people to ask for help or realize they need the help.
Yeah.
So some benefits to self-love are less stress and anxiety, higher satisfaction, boost in attractiveness, strong motivation, health and personal growth. For some of our patients, we could see increased resiliency. They could have gratitude for the programming and their treatment, and more willingness to participate in the programming, the treatment recommendations, and for some of them, willingness to plan for discharge. Because if we're lacking the self-love, we might just feel so down that we don't even want to get out of the hospital. We're stuck here. When we have the self-love aspects going on for us, we're more willing to participate in all levels of our care. So some obstacles to self-love, we're going to touch on each of these on the next slides. So negative self-talk, limiting beliefs, myths about loving yourself, negative emotions, the idea of perfectionism, inability to let yourself receive, and lack of spiritual connections we'll be talking about. So unfortunately, with all those positive benefits of self-love, these negative obstacles will be here too. So it is up to us as clinicians to assist our patients or clients in working through some of these obstacles. So one of the first obstacles is negative self-talk. This is one that everybody should be pretty familiar with. I know I do this once in a while and I have to catch myself. So I think it's important to try to record the thoughts that you have about yourself over the next couple of days to review what you had to say to yourself. Negative thoughts could include, I'm too stupid to do this. I can't do anything correct. I'm just a failure. What is wrong with me? I can't do this. All these, and then I would encourage you to let all of these judgments pass and think about how none is more important than the judgment we pass on to ourselves.
I often tell my patients, would you talk to your best friend the way you talk to yourself? And if you would, then you're pretty much on point. But if you're speaking to yourself the way that you would be angry that somebody else spoke to your parent or your best friend or your spouse, right? Then clearly you really shouldn't be speaking to yourself that way either, because it's not helpful. And I think like Jess said, we all do this. We're all negative. Oh my God, I'm so stupid. I can't believe I did that, right? And it's hard to stop getting out of that mindset unless we practice it.
I think it's hard to even realize you're doing it sometimes.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not always the culprit of saying, oh, I'm so dumb or I'm so stupid, but like, I play on a volleyball league and I'll miss the ball and I'll be like, I'm sorry, guys. Every time I miss it, why do I have to apologize? Like, I'm not going to hit the ball correctly every single time.
Right.
I don't need to apologize for like not being perfect all the time, because
Right.
of course we're not professional volleyball players.
But we've set ourselves up to feel as though we have to be because others are depending upon us, right? And I think it goes back to that whole entire self-esteem, the self-worth, right? Whether or not it's others that are depending upon us versus us, right? Working on ourselves. We can't get better for anybody else. We have to get better for ourselves. And then that avalanche will happen. It'll roll, the snowball will happen, and all of a sudden our relationships will improve because we are taking better care of ourselves. And that trickles down to all of the facets of our lives.
Yep.
And then let's talk for a second. What does negative self-talk do, right? It puts more obstacles in your way every single day. And, studies have shown that most of us make 300 to 400 self-evaluations a day, and 80% of those are negative. Is that like, think about this. And just like Jess said, you should start writing down just for a day or two. How many times do you talk negatively to yourself? And again, how many times would you talk negatively to somebody else that you love? You probably wouldn't.
Right. Even like the word can't, when you tell yourself, I can't do this, it just sets you up for that negative vibe that you really can't. If you just take that word out, just giving it a little bit more effort. I try to teach my patients that all the time. Like, it's like we have a serious power in the words that we use every day. If we stay in that negative mind frame and tell ourselves we can't do things or we can't get there,
Then
chances are you won't, because you're putting your own self in the way of an obstacle to get there.
Then there's limiting beliefs. How many of your core beliefs are the ones that you've developed since childhood? And how many of them come in from your family or your friends, right? How many ads a day do we see that we compare ourselves to others, okay? How many times of the day do we compare ourselves physically, okay? So think about that, the self-limiting core beliefs. That's huge. I need love and approval from those who are significant to me, right? And basically, according to this idea, it's my worthiness is wrapped up in these beliefs about myself because I can't control things. My unhappiness is outside of my control. It's somebody else, always somebody else's fault, right? People always should do the right thing, and then they should be blamed or punished when they're not. But guess what? We put our expectations based on other people, on what we think we would do, right? And when somebody doesn't do that, we get disappointed and we get frustrated, okay? And so we then get negative, and then it becomes a downward spiral there. But instead, we're going to talk more about this, but if we were to be able to move past those beliefs, right? Move past the limitations that we set on ourselves, life would be a heck of a lot better. And our patients' lives would be a heck of a lot better by recognizing that they don't need love and approval from those who are around them. It's great, but it's not necessary. And then, there's myths about the self-love. Some people don't know that meaning of self-love. They think that it means pampering yourself, from material items, right? They get pleased just by going shopping, right? Self-love is not a temporary fix. And we don't need to rely on those external factors when we learn how to love ourselves the right way. It doesn't mean that we're being selfish. It means that we're making our happiness a priority, and it's necessary. Because again, we always talk about how, especially we as therapists, we're caregivers. Of course, we didn't enter this field because we wanted to be selfish. And sometimes we, even ourselves, take on others' and their happiness, and that's what makes us happy. That's not okay. Our happiness should not be based on somebody else's happiness. It's necessary to recognize that we are priority as well, because we can't fix somebody else if we can't fix ourselves. And a lot of our patients also feel that way. They're stressed. They have all of these, feelings of lack of self-worth because this happened and I'm a failure and yada, 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 right? And so they feel that way. And then every extra thing adds on, and that's how they wind up in our care. And we have to let them know that it's okay to be self-loving and to not recognize this as selfishness. They have to keep working on themselves, and we all do.
Yep. I think that's why the educational portion of this is so important, because like some of these myths show it's not a temporary thing. I remember hearing some patients say, oh, I'm not feeling so good, I'm going to take a shower, then I'll feel better. It's not just a temporary fix, but in their minds that it is. So it's really important to educate them on the aspects of self-love to improve it over time, not just for the immediate moment.
Yeah. And then we have negative emotions, is sadness, frustration, anger, shame, and guilt. They cloud our ability to love ourselves. And then it leads to blaming ourselves. And then we get stuck in that place, that waiting place, as Dr. Seuss writes in I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the name, but the places you'll go. There's the waiting place. And all aspects of our lives, they suffer in the meantime. So how do we work through those negative emotions so that we can feel less stress and more freedom in our lives? It's really hard, especially when we take on others' issues, right? And if we don't know how to deal with daily life stressors, then every negative emotion is going to compound and feel as though there's a huge cloud over us and we're never going to be able to move past it. And that's the bigger issue here. We have to help our patients recognize that we absolutely can get rid of negative emotions, even when the situation is not perfect.
Right. So the ideal practitioner or clinician for a group like this is somebody that can demonstrate in everyday life a lot of these aspects that you are wanting patients to get out of self-love.
Yeah.
So this isn't just like a group that you're going to turn on all of these fun loving topics and discussion, and then on another group you're like, oh, today sucks, this group sucks. You also have to really be mindful of like how you are all the time. Like it's not just in group that you are doing these aspects of self-love and helping people with their self-worth. It's like on a daily interactive basis that I think we kind of lose sometimes, because especially in mental health these days, staffing is critical right now. We have people out of work. It's easy to get negative, and it's easy for patients to see that.
But I want to add, it's also okay to let our patients know that, we've had to use our own coping skills, right? There are days where I'd gone into group and I'm like, you guys, today I needed to use all of my coping skills and all of my woosahs because I was frustrated and this happened and I got stuck here. And it makes us human without giving too much and overcoming the boundaries and sharing, too much information about yourself. But really and truly, it also gives them the idea that it's okay to recognize that sometimes things are not going to go great, but if we use our skills, we can still make it through. And so recognizing that every therapist is not perfect, they have issues too. Again, not oversharing, but recognizing that, hey, they're human and they get frustrated and they get sad and they get angry as well. But how do we move forward from it? That's the bigger thing. That's the lesson that we can teach them.
Right. Perfectionism. Everybody loves talking about perfectionism. When searching for perfect, you never meet that standard of perfect because perfect is so, I don't know, it's not there. We can't ever find perfect.
Nobody is perfect. And I will always tell my patients, hey, you're perfect. And can you teach me how? Because Lord knows I'm not. And I'd like to learn. It is
Right.
no perfection.
And you're always feeling unfulfilled and unsatisfied because you can never reach this level of perfectionism because it's this unreal area that you're not able to get to.
And even if we get to whatever level we think we're at perfect, something's always going to be above it. And it's going to always be a reach and never attainable.
Yep. So when you practice self-love, you learn that you do not need to be perfect all the time and that errors happen, that you need help, that you might have a rough day, that maybe you're struggling a little. It's never going to be a perfect process.
And that's okay.
Another milestone to self-love is the inability to let yourself receive. So I see this quite a bit with some patients that I work with, especially more so with female patients, but sometimes with male patients. A lot has to do with past traumas. They feel like they are not deserving of love from other people. They feel like they're not deserving of treatment or help. A lot of those past traumas get in the way of them from being able to open their heart, have motivation for the future, and really it hurts their ability to be positive. So this can really get in the way of self-love for some people. It makes them build up this wall around themselves to protect themselves because the trauma is so terrible in their mind that they don't want to let anybody in. They don't want to even try to get over the wall. They want to just stay where they're safe. If you only ever give to other people though, and you never receive, it is impossible to feel fully enjoying life. And it is impossible to feel loved. You might feel afraid, taken advantage of. And it's hard to move forward, but think about what's worse. If you never try, you have those walls up and you're just stuck in your little box because you're fearful, you're worried about what happened to you before. Or would you rather learn from your life events and find love, learn about life, and have a great life for yourself? It's important that we teach our patients they are deserving of receiving from others and allowing themselves to. And it's not going to be comfortable. However, if we set up a safe place, a safe space for them to share and to go through some of these emotions, they'll start to come out and that wall will start to get shorter. Or maybe a window will develop or a door, but they will start to keep moving forward towards us.
Absolutely. And I think it also kind of, it goes hand in hand with that fight, flight, fawn, or flee, right? It goes hand in hand because when we have our fight or flight response, right? I'm sorry, not flee, excuse me. When that happens, even in the moment, right? Over time, our traumas compound on each other. And so we learn these behaviors of, fawning on others or running away or, getting on that wall built up. But instead, we really and truly need to make sure that, we are explaining what that fight or flight is. And we also need to make sure that we're understanding that past traumas do affect us now. And a lot of our patients do not realize that something happened to them in childhood and now it is affecting them even as adults because they never processed it. And that's the bigger issue.
So the last obstacle for self-love that we're going to talk about is lack of spiritual connections. Sometimes people may be lacking self-love due to a lack of that connection. They don't know if they believe in God. They don't know what they believe in general. Spirituality is personal and different for everyone. So how people perceive their spirituality will depend on who they are. They might believe in, like I said, a God. They might believe in nature, natural things in life. It totally depends on the person. And it is important for us to be really open-minded about that, because even though some of us might be very religious or have certain aspects that we truly believe in, it's important for us to be open-minded on what other people do and not pass judgments on them, because that also can make their self-love worse if we pass judgments onto them about what they believe in.
Right, because then they're going to close off that wall and they're going to say, oh, well, I'm being judged, so, no thank you. And I tell my students all the time, when we walk in the door of our facilities, our beliefs, our wishes, our everything needs to be left at the door. It shouldn't matter whether or not you're a very religious person, whether or not somebody else does or does not believe in, find strength in prayer or has a higher power, etc. We just have to help them no matter what. So let's talk a little bit about foundations of self-love as a theory. So really, as a cliche as it sounds, it really did start with that generation of the 50s and the 60s, right? And after the aftermath of World War II and then later Vietnam, Western societies really began promoting that peace and love to generate positive energy. Okay, so in 56, Fromm proposed that loving oneself is different from being arrogant, conceited, or egocentric. Rather, it's about taking responsibility for yourself. And he actually said that there should be a reevaluation of self-love. In order to be able to truly love someone else, you have to love yourself. He also said that self-love is about being realistic and honest about our own strengths and weaknesses. And that's really difficult to do. So by the 60s, Erikson then discussed this post-narcissistic appreciation of the value of the ego. And that's really important too, because it's not a narcissist thing here, right? We're not being narcissistic by loving ourselves. We're actually helping others by doing the same. And Rogers said that, one result of therapy is the regaining of that quiet sense of pleasure in being yourself. That's not easy to do, but we're going to get there by utilizing these types of interventions. And then, of course, in the 60s, we've all studied Maslow, of course. So we figured we're not going to go into that whole, hierarchy, but take a look here. He proposed that self-love and love are intertwined. Okay. Studies that showed negative and positive correlations between love styles and self-esteem levels suggested that people with lower self-esteem cannot give love to others in relationships. And again, he intimated that you can't reach that last level, that higher, that self-actualization, that balance, until our other needs have been met. And then Ferris, he said that, self-love involves having respect for your physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual health. I think that kind of sounds familiar, right? And it's about self-knowledge. It's about spirituality, the clarity of intention. What are we doing here, right? What's our intention? And then on top of that, not being judgmental, from being self-accepting and recognizing the value of that, because self-acceptance is necessary in order to get to self-actualization. In addition, he describes self-actualized individuals as enjoying their highest levels of self-acceptance than an average person. And it enabled them to be less afraid of the world, less afraid of external judgments, and more spontaneously expressive of their thoughts and their actions. So that's all well and good, but self-love as we know it in mental health today was defined in 2003 by Greg and Sid Kiedis by referring to a person's subjective appraisal of themselves as intrinsically positive or negative. That's huge, because we absolutely need to understand that difference between positive and negative, appraisal of ourselves, and recognize the value of improving the positivity aspect. Let's take a look for a second about self-love in marginalized communities. It's also used as a tool in communities of color since the 1970s. The slogan of Black is beautiful. And, that became a way for African Americans to throw off the mantle of the predominant white beauty norms, as they say. During the Black Power music, the Afro or the Fro, it became the popular hairstyle as a way of self-love, so that they take away, the need to flatten the hair in order to change the texture, right? Because take a look, it is still largely seen as unprofessional to wear an afro in the modern workplace. And I wrote sigh because really and truly in 2022, we need to move forward from that. But other marginalized communities have also spoken out about that, right? So women, we have the Dove Beauty campaign. There was the slut walk that happened, right? Religions, especially Islam, post 9/11 especially, there was a lot of need for self-love in that community after 9/11 when they were truly being treated as second-class citizens around the world. And it's not okay. So we need to help them figure out as well. Then we have LGBTQ, right? We have Pride, which we know stemmed from the Stonewall riots, okay? To currently, we have National Coming Out Day, National Day of Trans Recognition. We have moved further, but there's still a way to go. And we have to recognize that those of us who, let's be honest here, in our profession, I think the job analysis that the NCCRC put out, we're predominantly white women in this field. And we have to recognize that our clients might not look like us. They might not sound like us. They might not have the same beliefs as us, but we need to help them empower themselves without, trying to push our beliefs on them, if that makes sense.
Kind of like the spirituality that we talked about earlier, that could be an obstacle.
Absolutely.
This day and age, we really need to put aside what we believe about politics, religion, all these different aspects, and really let the patients talk about what they have to say and not judge them for it.
Absolutely. So we would be remiss if we didn't talk about DBT and self-love. And I'm hopeful that you've just learned about DBT itself. So DBT is dialectical behavioral therapy, as well as CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy. And so DBT was created by Marsha Linehan. It was generally originally used to only treat borderline personality disorder, but now it really and truly addresses many different dysregulation and impulse control disorders. So it's composed of learning the skills that assist with emotion regulation, improving relationships, and the ability to cope with daily life stressors without displaying impulsivity, self-harm, or risky behaviors, which we know happens all the time with our patients. And the ultimate goal of DBT is to build a, quote, life worth living. So the 4 modules of DBT are mindfulness, which are paying attention on purpose to the moment present, right then and there. Distress tolerance, going through a challenging moment without making the situation worse. Emotional regulation, staying in the, quote, wise mind, end quote, and managing emotional reactions or overreactions to stressors. And finally, that interpersonal effectiveness, using assertiveness skills to solve problems, to work out conflicts, with, again, not returning to that emotional dysregulation or distress tolerance rather.
Yeah, one of the things that we do at Hutchings, we have a DBT group, and our psychologist focuses each week on a certain skill. And we also sometimes break down each module that you see. Like we have an emotion regulation group, we have a mindfulness group, we might have a distress tolerance group, because sometimes these skills aren't as easy as you think, just doing like a week or 2 on them. It takes a lot of practice to incorporate them into your life.
Almost daily practice, to be honest. So let's take a look right here, right? We have DBT and self-love via positive self-talk. Because according to DBT practices, there are several ways to engage in that positive thinking. We're going to deconstruct the negative thoughts. We're going to challenge them. We're going to identify the fallacies in them, and notice the examples when they're not true, even when we're thinking them about ourselves, right? We're going to reframe those negative thoughts into positive alternatives, right? We're going to rehearse those positive and encouraging thoughts. Say those affirmations every morning and every evening. Because take a look here. The brain is most susceptible to the power of suggestion when it's close to sleep. However, we really shouldn't limit our limitations, our affirmations to morning and night. We need to say them all day long, and we need to say them until we believe them, and then they'll become natural. And so we're going to give you a link to this positive self-talk skill through DBT tools. And you can take a look here and you'll be able to see what it looks like. This can be printed out and you can utilize this when you are working with your patients, okay? We talk about triggers to our emotion. We talk about how to move forward. It's okay. Don't worry, it's all good. You guys know I could sell ice to an Eskimo. I could tell you all about it. But take a look, right? Because what we're doing is over the next few days, practice the skill. Identify what occurred to trigger the emotion. What emotion was it that actually happened, that came from that negative self-talk, right? And then what negative self-thoughts occurred even when I'm trying to do positive self-talk? How did I help myself to reframe it? That's really important. Okay.
Yeah, this worksheet looks like so similar to like chain analysis too, when you're reviewing behavior, like really reviewing what happened, what were you thinking, what was like what was going through your mind. It looks so similar to what a chain behavior analysis looks like.
Yeah, and that's really where it comes down to, right? Because really and truly, all of these skills come together. If I'm doing a skills group, I'm doing a mindfulness group, if I'm doing a chain analysis, all of it comes together because that's who we are. We're not just one facet. We're not just one emotion or one behavior. We are everything all at once. We are everything we've learned, every experience we've had. We are everything all at once. And so recognizing that we need to be able to, in the moment, as well as in the present, as well as in the future, recognize how to change the thought in the moment as well as the future is key to be able to actually engage in self-love itself.
So at this point, we want you guys to kind of think about, what do you need to do to help your patients and yourselves? Start thinking about what types of self-love programming you think might be important, what types of questions, what type of alterations you might need to make if you have certain patients in your group. Start thinking about some of these different things as we continue on. So I just want to show you a little briefly how we at Hutchings Psychiatric Center in Syracuse organize all of our different programs that we facilitate. So we use a group protocol, and in the group protocol, we are completing what the needs are of the group, the skills, like as you can see, the outcome indicators, description, all of those things. And they're a really good way to organize all the material so that you're not just going willy-nilly into a group and just saying, oh, I think we'll do this today. Really making sure you're staying part to the core and like doing the full purpose of what the group is intended to be for.
And I think it's really important that I was going to say, I'm glad that you have that there, but it's really important to recognize that if we do a protocol, we should really follow through on that protocol, because it's really and truly the way that anybody can come in and do the exact same group, and the patients don't suffer because we didn't prepare, if that makes sense.
Right. So what I've gotten accustomed to lately is, like you can see here, I listed it out in parts, and then on a different thing that I made, I literally wrote out a 12-week program. So like Sherry said, if I'm not in for some reason, if I call in, if I'm on vacation, someone can literally pick up the group information and leave the group the same way that I would have led it. They don't have any struggles in doing so. So I like to write these for that purpose and to hold myself accountable, because sometimes I feel like, I know everyone does this, we get a little lazy. We're like, we'll just do this today. Kind of keeps us accountable. And this is what we planned out. This is what we're going to do. Making sure we really bring to the table everything we should be bringing for the group. So this is just how I organize things. I know Sherry has done lesson plans in the past. However you want to organize is completely up to you, but just want to reiterate the importance of really making a strong either lesson plan, protocol. outline whatever it is and making sure you're hitting the points that you would like to hit. So one of the things that I did for self-love is I did a journaling group. We're lucky enough to have a computer lab at Hutchins Psychiatric Center, and we did a 10-week self-love journaling program, which was really cool. So some of the patients decided to use a notepad if they didn't want to use the computer, because we do have some older adults that don't know how to use the computer that well, have some paranoia around the computer use. So they had the choice whether they wanted to make a Gmail and save everything on their account, whether they just wanted to start fresh every day, not save the information, or use a pad of paper. So the way I structured the program is each program we would start with an affirmation of the day. We would reflect on the affirmation, and then we would identify what that affirmation meant to them. After we would do that, I created a list of questions that pertain specifically to each affirmation. So they weren't just random questions. They had to do with what the affirmation said. So the way I do my journaling groups might be different than the way that you guys would do it. I provide everybody the opportunity to either share if they want to or pass. And a lot of journaling groups, it's a mix. We have people that want to share and people that don't want to share, because some of the things that we're talking about are pretty deep and pretty personal. So I think it's important to make sure people realize they don't have to share in these types of groups if it's really personal information. And some things you might want to think about are some groups that aren't, or questions that aren't too personal if you're able to. Maybe some more general group questions if patients are feeling like they're writing too much down or sharing too much personal information. Some other examples I wanted to show you are from some workbooks that I have at work. So for some people, if they're not as skilled or not as able to come up with questions, or they're really hitting a wall, some books that I have used also to give me some guidance on these questions. I will show at the end of this, but here are some examples. And these are kind of helpful. Like I said, if you're hitting a wall and you're just like, I don't know what to talk about, maybe you could just use one that's already completed and made for you. So here's one of the books that I use pretty frequently with one of my female patients. I really like this book. And again, it has a ton of like pre-done questions, a ton of exercises that you could copy or you can fill out with them or have them do in their own journal.
So the I am activity. I love this one. When Jess showed me this, I was just, this is so great. You can do this as a jar, if you will. You could do this as, little slips of paper. You could do this as a list, but take a look here. Fill your jar with positive affirmations. I am loved. I am kind. I am special. I'm happy. I'm a soccer player. I'm nice. I'm a boy. I'm a, dog lover, whatever it is that you are, right? And this is so easy to do and so simple to do that, it's also really something that our patients might struggle with, because it's really hard to identify, whatever you're looking for, right? If we're saying positive affirmations, sometimes it's really hard to find things that you want to tell others about that you're proud of, right? So a soccer player, a dog lover, that might not seem as though it's like super deep, but you know what? It's a start. And it could be that we can turn that I'm a soccer player into I'm a soccer player and I'm a damn good one, right? I'm a dog lover and my dogs love me because they know I am caring and that I'm kind and that I'm, always there for them and they know I'm dependable, right? It doesn't have to be this deep, deep stuff that we then can turn into a deeper discussion, even if they're struggling to find something positive about themselves. And we have to be able to help ourselves do that and help them do that as well.
Yeah, so the way that we did this, I'm going to try to be brief because we're running over a little. The way that we try to do this program is that we use little mason jars, and we had participants at our session. I did the session at my site as well as we did it at Nystra last year. We had people write these positive affirmations about themselves, and they put them in the jar. And then we asked people to keep the jar where you think you might need this information, whether that be in your car, whether that be at your office, whether that be at home, and then read them when you need it. Of course, we can't always have glass jars everywhere, so you have to be mindful of that. You might have to make some accommodations. Maybe you can get an envelope, and you can have patients put each paper in the envelope, and when they need it, they can pull a thing out of the envelope, a piece of paper out of the envelope, and read it when they're needing a little bit of motivation for their day. So just being, I don't know, able to be on your toes and change things around a little depending on where you work.
Yep.
And then these are some other awesome resources that I have used in some programming where I work. The self-love workbook for women, I used specifically in an individual session with somebody, and it was amazing. And the No Worries workbook I also used quite a bit too. So I would recommend any of these workbooks. They're pretty easy to use. You could probably even use the self-love workbook in a complete program. Even the self-compassion one, it really goes through each of the aspects and separates the books out very well. And then here are our resources. A million different things.
But that's what our practice is. It's finding things from a million different resources and locations, and making a program out of nothing because we hear a patient say, oh, I'm the worst, and all of a sudden we have an hour-long program about self-esteem and self-worth, right? So that's what we do as therapists. We find it, and if you find other stuff that you think is really beneficial, let us know. Reach out to us and share with us so that we can share with others the benefits of self-love.
So thank you for tuning in with us today. Once again, this was Sherry and Jess. Thank you for committing to the hour with us, and we hope you got something out of this presentation. See you all soon.
All right, bye-bye now. Be well.